When a hospital nurse secretly warns me to check my bank statements, I discover that the people I trusted most have quietly emptied my life savings and are planning to ship me off to a nursing home, so I stay very calm, quietly gather proof, and turn their little scheme into their own public humiliation and financial downfall. The first time I saw the note, it was just a soft white corner peeking out between my fingers and the hospital blanket. I was lying there in one of those thin gowns, my left arm taped to an IV pole, the heart monitor making that little hiccup sound every time my pulse jumped. My son, Mark, stood at the foot of the bed with his back half turned to me, arguing with the billing clerk about my wallet like it belonged to him. "I'm her power of attorney," he was saying, that tight, annoyed tone he saved for waiters and customer service. "You can talk to me. I need the card, the ID, everything so we can get this processed. She gets anxious when you bother her with numbers." The clerk glanced toward me. "Mrs. Turner, is that all right with you?" I opened my mouth, but my tongue felt heavy, cotton dry. The medication fuzzed the edges of the room. I saw Mark's jaw tighten. He answered for me. "She's not really up for decisions right now, are you, Mom?" Nurse Rosa was at my side, pretending to adjust the IV lead stuck to my chest. Up close, I could see the little silver strands in her dark hair, the faint scent of citrus lotion on her hands. Her eyes kept flicking between my face and Mark's back. When the clerk finally gave up and walked away to check with the supervisor, Mark's phone buzzed. "Of course, I have to take this." He stepped into the hallway, voice already rising as the door swung shut behind him. That's when Rosa slipped the folded scrap of paper into my palm. Her fingers lingered for half a heartbeat, pressing down like she was passing something much heavier than a torn piece of printer paper. She leaned close, the plastic name badge on her chest brushing my arm. "Read this when you're alone, okay?" she whispered. Her eyes were soft but urgent. "Please." By the time I blinked up at her, she had straightened, checking the IV line like nothing had happened. I waited until her back was to the door, until I heard Mark's muffled voice outside saying something about long-term care and "we can't afford this." My hand shook as I pulled the note open under the blanket. "Ask to see your bank statements. Today. Online. In private." The letters were small and firm. No explanation, no decoration. Just that. For a moment, I thought I was reading it wrong. My mind flashed back, fast and sharp, through little snapshots I'd brushed away at the time. Mark taking my debit card, just for a few days, to set up auto payments. Jenna standing in my kitchen telling me how unsafe it was for me to live alone now. The man with the clipboard walking around my living room, measuring windows and muttering, "insurance value," while Mark nodded along. The heart monitor sped up. Beep, beep, beep. I fumbled for my phone on the tray table. The plastic was cold and unfamiliar in my fingers. I still wasn't used to the new model Mark had insisted on. My thumb missed the passcode twice before I got it right. Each second felt like I was pushing through wet sand. The banking app icon stared up at me. I tapped it. My breath came short and shallow. Outside the room, Mark's voice drifted in and out through the cracked door. "No, a facility. Yes, my sister lives out of state. No, she's not involved." The app loaded. My balance appeared. For a second, I honestly thought it was a glitch. Numbers wrong, decimal point in the wrong place. Then the reality hit me, hard as the first contraction when I had him. The account I had built over 40 years of work, of clipping coupons and saying no to vacations, was almost empty. The list of transactions blurred as my eyes filled. Payments and transfers I didn't recognize. Large sums labeled online transfer, authorized. Monthly payments to some loan company I'd never heard of. "Mom?" Mark's voice boomed back into the room and I nearly dropped the phone. He came in, pocketing his own, and flashed me a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So, did you sign the nursing home papers yet? They're really pushing for a bed to open up soon." I looked up at him, my heart pounding so hard the monitor screamed, and in that moment, as calmly as my shaking body would allow, I knew whoever had bled my account dry was standing right in front of me, and I was done being the confused, grateful mother he thought he owned. Before all that, I was just Grandma Elaine with my little paid-off house and my boring, predictable life, the kind nobody ever makes a movie about. I'd been a school librarian for 35 years. That meant I could find any book in the building with my eyes closed. I knew which third grader was lying about finishing their reading log, and I could silence an entire class with just an eyebrow. It did not, apparently, mean my own children believed I could handle a banking app.
After my husband Tom died 7 years ago, I kept the house the way we'd always had it. Small brick place on a quiet street. Creaky porch steps that groaned in the winter, a lemon-scented kitchen because I refused to buy anything but that one brand of floor cleaner. Every morning I got up, put on my soft robe, and made tea in the blue kettle he bought me for our 25th anniversary. It wasn't a fancy life, but it was mine. The house was paid off. We'd scrimped and gone without when we were young. No new cars, no big screen TV, no cruises, but his pension and my little retirement fund had grown steadily. I liked knowing that if my knees got worse or I needed help one day, I could pay for it. I didn't want to be a burden. That was the story I told anyone who would listen. I had 2 children. Mark, the oldest, was always the smart one with numbers. He corrected the tip at restaurants when he was 10. He bought his first stock in some tech company when he was 19. He grew up into the kind of man who wore slim suits and walked like his time cost more than anyone else's. Beth was my younger one. She got her father's eyes and my tendency to trip over flat surfaces. She lived clear across the country now, juggling 2 kids and a husband finishing his degree. She called me a few times a week, breathless, always with the baby crying in the background. She never had money to spare, but she had time for my stories, and that counted for more than she realized. The first little red flag didn't look red at all. It looked like kindness. "Mom," Mark had said one Sunday afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of papers, "you cannot keep doing this old school." He tapped my neat folder of bank statements with the finger. "You're wasting money on fees. Let me consolidate this, put you into some better accounts, set up autopay. This is literally my job." Jenna, his wife, stood at the counter rearranging my spice cabinet without asking. Little glass jars clicked against each other as she moved them around. You know, people your age really shouldn't be handling online banking. It's too easy to make mistakes. Scammers, you know. I do all right," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "I pay what I owe." Mark rolled his eyes. "Mom, please, let me help. It's not 1980 anymore." I didn't like the eye roll, but I did like not having to drive to the bank in the snow. I liked thinking my son was watching out for me. So I signed where he pointed. It was like that, over and over, one small thing at a time. There was the Sunday dinner where he laughed and said, "Mom, when we put you in a home, at least we'll pick one with a garden." And everyone chuckled, including me. I swallowed a little sting. I told myself it was just a joke. We'd always teased in our family. There was the afternoon I came back from my book club meeting to find my kitchen upside down. Jenna had rearranged all my cabinets, cups and plates and spices in places that made no sense to me. "It's more efficient this way," she told me, closing a door with her hip. "Trust me, you'll thank me later." I stood there holding a dishcloth, feeling like a guest in my own kitchen. There was the day he took my car keys for a safety check, said he'd bring it back after work. He came back 2 days later, smelling faintly of beer, and tossed them on the counter. "Sorry, Mom, I was busy. You really shouldn't be driving so much anyway. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be." "Mark, I had a doctor's appointment," I said softly. He kissed the air near my cheek, already walking away. "You should have called me for a ride then." Little things. Paper cuts you tell yourself not to notice because you know the person holding the knife. My health had never been perfect. I had high blood pressure, a temperamental knee, and a stubborn streak that made me push through aches instead of resting. The first time I felt it,
It was at church, right after standing up too fast. The pastor's wife caught my elbow, and the next thing I knew, I was staring at the ceiling tiles, and somebody was fanning me with the bulletin. At my checkup, the doctor spoke kindly, but his eyes were serious. Maybe have someone stay with you for a little while, Mrs. Turner, just until we get your medication settled. No more climbing on chairs to reach the good dishes. I laughed. Mark, sitting in the corner, did not. You hear that? He said in the car afterwards. You can't be alone anymore. What if something happens and nobody knows? I managed fine, I told him, watching the neighborhood roll by. The maple trees I loved blurred together. He snapped, then in a calmer voice, Look, Mom, I'm just saying we need to start thinking long term. You don't want Beth to have to uproot her life. I'm here. Let me handle things. Foreshadowing should be obvious when you look back. At the time, it just feels like another conversation you're too tired to argue about.
One afternoon, I heard Jenna in the living room on the phone. I was in the hallway, hands full of clean towels, moving slow because of my knee. Her voice floated around the corner. Once the house is sorted, everything will be easier, she was saying. Yes, he's talking to the bank. No, she doesn't really understand all that. She trusts him completely. When I turned the corner, she startled, then smiled wide. Oh, Elaine! I was just telling my sister how lucky we are to have you so close. Makes things easier. I nodded, pressing the towels to my chest, a twinge deep in my stomach I didn't want to name. Then there was the day of the papers. Mark came over with his letter folder and that focused look he gets like he is about to close a deal. We sat at the kitchen table, where I'd helped him fill out college applications and glue macaroni for art projects when he was 5. Mom, these are just updated insurance forms, he said, sliding page after page toward me. Since Dad's old policy finally closed out, there are some beneficiary things and lien releases and blah, blah. Honestly, you'd fall asleep if I explained it. Here, sign there, and there, and there. The pen felt heavy in my hand. My joints ached. The letters on the top blurred together if I tried to read them. I told myself it was my eyes, not my brain. Mark, I should probably... He put a gentle hand on mine. Do you trust me? Of course I did. He was my son. I had held his feverish body at 2 a.m, wiped his nose, prayed over him when his lungs rattled. He had stood at our dining table at 17 and promised me, with tears in his eyes, Mom, I'll take care of you and Beth, always. Yes, I said, and I signed. I had no idea those strokes of ink were the first steps towards signing away almost everything I had built, or that one day I would have to learn how to sign it back. The day everything snapped open started like any other errand day. I was in the grocery store enjoying the small comfort of routine. The produce section smelled like oranges and damp earth. I held on to the handle of my cart, feeling the cool metal under my fingers, and argued quietly with myself about whether the more expensive grapes were worth it. I remember reaching for a bag of potatoes. The world tipped sideways. The whispers of people nearby turned into tinny echoes. My chest tightened, a band of pressure wrapping around my ribs. My ears filled with a rushing sound, like when Tom and I used to take the kids to the beach and a wave would crash over my head. Someone called my name. Elaine? Ma'am? Then nothing. When I woke up, the lights were too bright. The ceiling was too white. There was a plastic taste in my mouth, and something pinched in the back of my hand. I heard beeping, felt the tug of tape on my skin, and the air smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Mrs. Turner? A young doctor leaned over me, his face floating into focus. I'm Dr. Lee. You're at St. Mary's. You had an episode at the store. We're going to keep you for observation and run some tests, okay? For how long? My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from the wrong end of a tin can. Just a couple of days, most likely, he said kindly. We want to keep an eye on your blood pressure and your heart rhythm. You gave folks quite a scare. I gave a little laugh that died in my throat. I scared myself. By the time Mark arrived, I'd been poked and prodded, rolled through one of those humming machines, and helped onto a bed in a private room. My head hurt. My hair was flattened on one side. I felt old in a way that went past birthday. He walked in with his firm's logo still pinned to his suit jacket, talking before he fully crossed the threshold. Mom, you can't give us a heart attack like that, Mom, he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. He smelled like cologne and coffee. You really have to slow down. I was buying potatoes. He chuckled, then immediately turned serious. So, what's the plan here? He asked the nurse, as if I wasn't in the room. Later, when the doctor stepped out, a woman with a clipboard and a calm smile came in. I'm Karen with Care Coordination. We need to talk about discharge planning, where you'll go after your stay here. Home, I said automatically. I just need to take it easy for a bit. Maybe get one of those lifeline buttons. He scoffed. Home is not safe for her. She lives alone, stairs, no full-time support. Karen looked at me. Do you live alone, Mrs. Turner? Any caregivers at home? Yes, but I manage. I started. She has a history of confusion. She forgets to take her meds. She's almost fallen several times. We've discussed this before. A facility is the best option. Luckily, I already have durable power of attorney on file, so we can move quickly. It was the first I'd heard of any history of confusion.
One afternoon, I heard Jenna in the living room on the phone. I was in the hallway, hands full of clean towels, moving slow because of my knee. Her voice floated around the corner. Once the house is sorted, everything will be easier, she was saying. Yes, he's talking to the bank. No, she doesn't really understand all that. She trusts him completely. When I turned the corner, she startled, then smiled wide. Oh, Elaine, I was just telling my sister how lucky we are to have you so close. Makes things easier. I nodded, pressing the towels to my chest, a twinge deep in my stomach I didn't want to name. Then there was the day of the papers. Mark came over with his leather folder and that focused look he gets like he's about to close a deal. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd helped him fill out college applications and glue macaroni for art projects when he was 5. Mom, these are just updated insurance forms, he said, sliding page after page toward me. Since Dad's old policy finally closed out, there are some beneficiary things and lien releases and blah blah. Honestly, you'd fall asleep if I explained it. Here, sign there. In there. In there. The pen felt heavy in my hand. My joints ached. The letters on the top blurred together if I tried to read them. I told myself it was my eyes, not my brain. Mark, I should probably... He put a gentle hand on mine. Do you trust me? Of course I did. He was my son. I had held his feverish body at 2 a.m, wiped his nose, prayed over him when his lungs rattled. He had stood at our dining table at 17 and promised me with tears in his eyes, Mom, I'll take care of you and Beth, always. Yes, I said, and I signed. I had no idea those strokes of ink were the first steps towards signing away almost everything I had built, or that one day I would have to learn how to sign it back. The day everything snapped open started like any other errand day. I was in the grocery store, enjoying the small comfort of routine. The produce section smelled like oranges and damp earth. I held onto the handle of my cart, feeling the cool metal under my fingers, and argued quietly with myself about whether the more expensive grapes were worth it. I remember reaching for a bag of potatoes. The world tipped sideways. The whispers of people nearby turned into tinny echoes. My chest tightened, a band of pressure wrapping around my ribs. My ears filled with a rushing sound, like when Tom and I used to take the kids to the beach and a wave would crash over my head. Someone called my name. Elaine? Ma'am? Then nothing. When I woke up, the lights were too bright. The ceiling was too white. There was a plastic taste in my mouth and something pinched in the back of my hand. I heard beeping, felt the tug of tape on my skin, and the air smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Mrs. Turner? A young doctor leaned over me. His face floated into focus. I'm Dr. Lee. You're at St. Mary's. You had an episode at the store. We're going to keep you for observation and run some tests, okay? My heart thudded weakly under the monitor leads. For how long? My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from the wrong end of a tin can. He said, just a couple of days, most likely. We want to keep an eye on your blood pressure and your heart rhythm. You gave folks quite a scare. I gave a little laugh that died in my throat. I scared myself. By the time Mark arrived, I'd been poked and prodded, rolled through one of those humming machines, and helped onto a bed in a private room. My head hurt. My hair was flattened on one side. I felt old in a way that went past birth date. He walked in with his firm's logo still pinned to his suit jacket, talking before he fully crossed the threshold. You can't give us a heart attack like that, Mom. You really have to slow down. I was buying potatoes. He chuckled and then immediately turned serious. So, what's the plan here? He asked the nurse as if I wasn't in the room. Later, when the doctor stepped out, a woman with a clipboard and a calm smile came in. She said, I'm Karen with Care Coordination. We need to talk about discharge planning, where you'll go after your stay here. Home, I said automatically. I just need to take it easy for a bit, maybe get one of those lifeline buttons. Mark scoffed. Home is not safe for her. She lives alone, stairs, no full-time support. We've discussed this before. A facility is the best option. Luckily, I already have durable power of attorney on file, so we can move quickly. It was the first I had heard of any history of confusion.
Karen's pen paused. Her eyes flicked to mine. Mrs. Turner, do you know what a durable power of attorney is? I swallowed. I thought that was just for emergencies. Temporary. Mark reached into his leather folder, crisp and confident, and slid a photocopy across the bedside table. Here, he said. Signed and notarized. We did this after Dad passed, remember? You wanted someone to handle things if anything happened. My name was there at the bottom, looping and familiar, under language about broad financial authority. The heat rushed to my face. My ears rang. I stared at that signature, trying to remember the day I'd put it there. The kitchen table, the heavy pen, his earnest question, Do you trust me? Yes, I remember, I lied softly. What else could I say? That I had signed without understanding? That I had let trust stand in for reading comprehension? So I'll coordinate with the facility, Mark told Karen, already shifting into project mode. We've been looking at options. One with memory care would be ideal given her age. I started, but my throat closed. The humiliation sat heavy on my chest, thicker than any fluid the nurses could draw off. Karen's professional smile faltered. We'll need to make sure Mrs. Turner is involved in any decision about her living situation. Even with the power of attorney, we try to honor the patient's wishes. Of course, Mark said, the words smooth as glass. Later, I would realize how good he was at saying the right things in front of the right people. That afternoon, when the room finally quieted, when the tests were done and the well-meaning volunteers had taken their magazines and left, Rosa came back. She checked my IV, my blood pressure, my chart. Then, when we were alone, she perched on the edge of the bed and lowered her voice. Mrs. Turner, she said, do you have access to your online bank account on your phone? My stomach clenched. Yes. Why? She looked at the closed door, then back at me. I've seen this before.
Sons, daughters, nieces. They bring me forms to sign. They talk over the patient. They use phrases like confused and memory care, and we can't afford this. Sometimes it's just stress. Sometimes, she let the sentence dangle. I don't understand all this power of attorney stuff, I admitted. I thought it was just in case I ended up in a coma or something. She squeezed my hand. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. It never hurts to look. Ask to see your bank statements today, online, in private. You still have that right. Fear and shame rustled in my chest. I didn't want to see, but I had to know. I opened the app. I watched my life savings melt down the screen, line by line. Multiple monthly payments to Prime Home Equity Services. Several online transfer authorized to an account that ended in numbers I didn't recognize, but were suspiciously close to Mark's. ATM withdrawals on dates I knew I'd been at home, watching daytime TV with my bad knee on a pillow. It was like seeing a burglary report of my own heart. Is it possible, I asked Rosa, my voice barely a whisper, for someone with power of attorney to do this? Without telling me? Her expression told me the answer before she said a word. You might need a different kind of doctor, honey, she said softly. A lawyer. I nodded slowly, the room tilting just slightly, even with me lying flat. Later that day, I waited for Mark to have gone downstairs to make a few calls and the nurse to have stepped out, and I dialed the number on the back of my debit card with clumsy fingers. The hold music buzzed in my ear for a full minute. Then a polite woman answered. Thank you for calling Riverbend Bank. This is Allison. How can I help you today? Yes, hello. My name is Elaine Turner, and I'm calling because I think there's been a mistake with my account. I never got to finish the sentence. The door swung open. Mark walked in mid-sentence. There you are, he said, annoyance flashing across his face before smoothing into concern. Who are you talking to? The bank, I said, my grip tightening on the phone. He was at my bedside in 2 strides. Hi, this is her son, he said, plucking the phone from my hand with a practiced ease that made my stomach twist. Yeah, she's in the hospital. She gets confused. I handle everything. You can just... Yes, that's right. I'm on file. He hit the red button and ended the call. Just like that. Mom, he scolded, setting my phone back on the tray like he was putting away a toy. You can't just call people like that when you're on all these meds. You'll mess something up. I stared at him, my cheeks burning with a mix of anger and shame I hadn't felt since I was a teenager being scolded by my own mother. For the first time in my life, a clear thought formed, cold and hard as ice. My son may be stealing from me. Rest, he said, smoothing the blanket up over my chest. Let me handle things. That's what I'm here for. I looked up into his face, at the familiar blue eyes that had once begged me for ice cream, the jawline so much like his father's, now clenched in irritation.
Inside, something old and stubborn sat up straight. Fine, I thought. Handle things. I will let you. I will play the part of the confused old woman you keep describing, just long enough to make sure you never see what's coming. After that, they stopped talking about my future around me like I was part of the conversation. They started talking about me the way people talk about a roof that needs replacing or a car that isn't worth fixing. Mrs. Turner, the social worker said on her next visit, we're just trying to find the safest option. Your son and daughter-in-law have been very involved. Yes, they were very involved. Like termites are involved with wood. Mark and Jenna began showing up in shifts, always armed with forms and manila folders. Just hospital paperwork, they'd chirp. Just the long-term care admission packet. We don't want to bother you with the details. Just sign here. I noticed they never left the folder anywhere near my hands. Jenna held it like a clutch purse, its edge pressed into her ribs, flipping to the correct signature line with manicured fingers. At the family meeting with the hospital social worker,
I sat in my bed, socks on, hair brushed by some kind volunteer, feeling like a prop in a play I hadn't auditioned for. Jenna dabbed at her dry eyes. "It's just been so hard," she said, voice wobbling. "You know, with the kids and our mortgage and trying to keep Mom safe. We've done everything we can." Mark nodded solemnly. "Her house is just too much for her. Stairs, old wiring, no grab bars. We already have a pending sale. It'll give us the funds we need to secure her a good facility." The social worker's pen paused. She repeated, "A pending sale? Mrs. Turner, did you consent to the sale of your home?" My heart lurched. What? Mark slid a look at me, half warning, half pity. "We've talked about it, Mom, remember? It's the only way to afford your care. We can't bankrupt ourselves. I have to think of my own family, too." "So you are currently in contract to sell her house?" the social worker pressed. "Pending inspections, yes. As her power of attorney, I've signed off. It's all in her best interest." I felt my position crumble under me like rotten floorboards. The hospital bills were piling up. Insurance only covered so much. Everyone kept telling me there was no money left to cover private care at home. But I knew there had been money. I had watched those numbers grow year after year, like a little garden I watered with every skipped vacation and secondhand coat. Where had it gone? Later that night, when the fluorescent glare dimmed and the hallway quieted, Lily slipped into my room. She was all elbows and knees, taller than the last time I'd seen her, her black curls pulled into a messy bun. She smelled like cheap shampoo and vanilla lotion. "Grandma," she whispered, sliding onto the bed and hugging me carefully around the IV lines. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby," I lied, patting her back. "Just tired." She pulled away, her eyes shiny. "They're sending you to some home?" she asked. "Dad says it's nice, but—" "But?" I coaxed. She bit her lip, then pulled out her phone. "Cassie sent me this," she said, opening a photo. "It's your front yard." The grass I'd always kept just a little too long, the rose bush Tom planted by the mailbox, and right there, staked in the ground like a spear, was a white and blue sign. "For sale." My breath left my body in one hard rush. "He never told you?" she whispered. I shook my head. Something hot and sharp flared in my chest. Fear, yes, but underneath it, anger. The kind that doesn't yell, the kind that remembers. When Mark came in later, I asked about it. My voice was calm, too calm. "I saw the sign," I said. He froze for half a second, then sighed, putting on his patient face. "Mom, we talked about this." "No," I said softly. "You talked. I was there." He rubbed his forehead. "Do you want me to lose my house? My kids? You don't understand money, Mom. Let me handle this. Please. You're making it harder." I thought of all the permission slips I'd signed for him, all the times I'd paid late fees when he forgot a library book, all the nights I'd sat at that kitchen table worrying about how to stretch $10 into groceries and gas. "I understand enough," I said simply. He didn't like that answer. His jaw tightened. "The nursing home is the only realistic option. You can't live on your own anymore. End of story." But my story wasn't done. Outwardly, I began to play along. I started repeating questions, letting him think I'd forgotten the answer. "When is the meeting again?" I'd ask, even though I'd already written it down. "What's the name of that place?" I'd say, as if the words Maple Ridge Care Center weren't burned into my brain. "See," he'd tell the nurses, "she's getting worse." Inside, I was cataloging everything. I asked harmless questions, like a woman making small talk. "What bank is the house loan through again, honey? I always like their pens." He'd say,
casually. "Prime home equity. Don't worry about it." I started keeping a little notebook in my bedside drawer. Nothing suspicious on the cover, just a floral print, like the ones I used to hand out to teachers at the end of the year.
Inside, I wrote down dates, names, amounts, the exact phrases they used. Pending sale, power of attorney, for her own good. I wrote in small letters, in between blood pressure readings and notes about what I ate for lunch. So if anyone flipped through it, it would look like a confused old woman keeping track of her day. I asked Rosa and the social worker for a private visit with someone from patient advocacy. "I think there may be some misunderstandings," I said delicately, "about my finances, about who is allowed to make decisions. I want to be sure." They exchanged a look. I saw comprehension flash between them. "We can arrange that," the social worker said. "And Mrs. Turner, if you ever feel like someone is speaking for you instead of with you, you have the right to say so." "I don't want to fight," I told her. "I just want to understand." I also asked for printed copies of my medical forms. I pretended it was because I liked to keep everything in a folder at home for my records. Really, I wanted to see who I had listed as my emergency contact, who had been quietly moved into the center of my life on paper. Mark's name was on everything. Bess was nowhere. The escalation point came one afternoon when I was writing in my notebook and Mark walked in unexpectedly. "What's that?" he asked, reaching for it before I could tuck it away. "Oh, just my diary," I said, my voice light even as my pulse spiked. He flipped through the pages, his eyes skimming over blood pressure 140/90, Jell-O for dessert. "Nice nurse today," he laughed. "Writing your memoirs, Mom," he teased, tossing it back onto the tray. The nurses laughed politely. I let my cheeks flush, let the embarrassment wash over me like I was 80 instead of 68, and more fragile than I felt. Inside, I exhaled slowly. He hadn't read long enough to reach the pages in the middle where the real story was unfolding in numbers and names. When I was finally discharged, it was not to my own house. It was to his. "Just for a little while," he said, helping me into his car, "until the nursing home has a bed. You'll like Maple Ridge, Mom. They have bingo and movie nights. You won't be alone." I pressed my hand against the cool glass of the car window as we drove past my street. My house stood there, solid and square, the curtains I'd sewn myself hanging in the front window, the for sale sign dug into the lawn like a stake. A bright red sale pending banner flapped underneath, cheerful and final. I didn't cry. There's a certain kind of pain that's too deep for tears. It just settles in your bones and waits. That night, I lay awake in the guest room at Mark and Jenna's. The walls painted a pale gray that showed every shadow. The mattress smelled faintly of fabric softener and something else, like it had been rarely used. Through the thin walls, I heard their voices. "We can't drag this out forever," Jenna was saying. "The realtor wants a firm closing date, and Maple Ridge said they can't hold the room unless the deposit clears." "It will," Mark said. I could hear the clink of ice in a glass. "Once the closing happens, we're fine. And until then, we're floating the costs. We can't afford. Just make sure she signs what she needs to sign before her next episode. The last thing we need is her getting stubborn and backing out." I stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the plaster with my eyes, and whispered to myself in the dark, "I don't intend to sign anything. Not this time. The only thing I'm signing is their bill." Back at their house, my life shrank down to one room and a few allowed routines. They set up a little tray table by the bed with my pill organizer, a glass of water, my glasses. Jenna swept in and out with tight smiles and, "How are we doing today?" like she was my elderly client instead of her husband's mother. Privacy became something I had to steal in bits and pieces. The bathroom door became my best friend. So did Lily. She knocked gently the first night, edging in with her homework binder clutched to her chest. "Hey, Grandma, I brought you your phone. Dad said you shouldn't have it because of stress, but that's stupid. You'll get in trouble, I warned her, even as I took it gratefully from her. She shrugged one skinny shoulder. I'm already in trouble for existing. Might as well go all in. She showed me how to turn off message previews so text wouldn't pop up on the screen for anyone to read. She downloaded a scanning app and demonstrated how I could take pictures of papers and save them to a secret folder. You're a genius, I told her. I'm 16 and on my phone too much. Same thing. With Lily's help, I finally got more than a glimpse of my financial picture. We waited until everyone else was downstairs watching some show with lots of shouting. Then we sat hip to hip on the guest bed, the blue glow of the borrowed laptop lighting our faces. Okay, she said, fingers flying over the keyboard. So you log in here. Same password you told me, right?
I nodded. She typed it in and hit enter. My account history unfolded on the screen like a confession. Whoa, she breathed. There they were, multiple large transfers labeled care agreement, online transfer, all going to an account partially redacted but with the name familiar to me, M. Turner. The home equity loan paperwork was scanned right into the file. When she clicked it open, my heart stopped for a beat. There was my signature again. But the top of the page did not say insurance update or beneficiary. It said home equity line of credit agreement. The date matched that afternoon at the kitchen table. The loan was against my house, the house I had thought of as fully mine for over a decade. Grandma, Lily whispered, horrified. Did you know about this? I closed my eyes. I saw the pen, the heaviness in my hand, his voice. Do you trust me? No, I did not. Midway through scrolling, another line of text caught my eye. Wait, I said, pointing with the shaking hand. Go back up. There it was, like a little lifeboat in a sea of red. A smaller account, different bank. The name of the institution tugged at a thread in my memory. Oh, I forgot about that, I breathed. It had been an old retirement account from a job before the school district. I'd rolled it over once, then never thought much of it again. The balance wasn't huge, not compared to what I'd lost, but it was enough to turn the lights back on in my head. This one, I said, he doesn't handle this bank. He always cursed them at tax time. Can we move it? Lily stared at the numbers, then at me. You want to move it? Yes, I said. My voice sounded stronger than I'd heard in weeks. To somewhere he doesn't know, somewhere safe. She grinned unexpectedly and fierce. Let's do it. We spent the next hour going through the online forms. We changed the mailing address to Beth's home out of state. We requested a transfer to a new account that Mark had never set up. I answered security questions I hadn't seen in years. What was your first pet's name? What street did you grow up on? It felt like dialing my own history back into place. When we finished, a confirmation screen popped up. Transfer request submitted. I exhaled a shaky laugh. Well, I murmured, look at that. Turns out your grandma still remembers a thing or two. The next step was harder. The patient advocate from the hospital called me back 2 days later. I sat in the guest room closet with the door mostly closed, my knees pressed against a box of winter coats. She said, "We got your message, Mrs. Turner. Based on what you described, it would be wise to consult an elder law attorney. I can give you a name if you'd like, and I'm so sorry you're going through this." "Please," I said, "I need someone who can explain all this in simple terms." That's exactly what they do. She gave me the name Priya Paten. I wrote it down in my notebook between Mark, Prime Home Equity, and loan date versus signature date in shaky letters. Calling Miss Patel felt like sneaking out of my parents' house when I was 17, my heart banging against my ribs. I waited until Mark and Jenna took the kids to soccer and the house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge.
Then I slipped back into the closet, dialed the number, and pressed the phone to my ear. Patel Law, this is Hannah, a cheerful voice answered. Yes, hello. My name is Elaine Turner. I was referred by the hospital. I think my son may have been using my power of attorney to move my money without my knowledge, and he's trying to put me in a nursing home so he can sell my house. There was a pause. Then in a softer tone, okay, Mrs. Turner, thank you for calling. Can you tell me a little more? Do you feel safe right now? I'm in his house, I admitted, so I suppose that depends on your definition of safe. They scheduled a call with Miss Patel herself later that afternoon. When she came on the line, her voice was calm and precise with a hint of warmth. Mrs. Turner, I know this is hard, but you're not alone. What you're describing, unexplained transfers, secret loans, and pressure to go into care against your wishes, is unfortunately something I hear too often. It is called financial exploitation, and it is serious. Is it a crime? I asked, my throat tight. It can be, she said, especially if there was forgery involved or if your power of attorney was misused. The first step is to gather documentation, bank statements, copies of the loan, the original power of attorney, and any emails or texts that mention these decisions. Then we will talk about revoking his authority and protecting what remains. I pressed my palm against my skirt, feeling the fabric bunch under my fingers. Can I do that? I whispered. Revoke it? He tells everyone I'm confused, that I don't know what I'm saying half the time. Has any doctor declared you incompetent? She asked. No, I said. They say I need rest and blood pressure medicine. That's all. Then yes, she replied. You can absolutely revoke it. You are still the owner of your life, Mrs. Turner. He is not your guardian. He is your agent, and an agent can be fired.
She walked me through the steps. We would draft a new power of attorney, this time with someone I trusted, Beth perhaps. We would notify the bank that the old one was revoked and ask for a fraud review on the loan and transfers. We would, if necessary, involve adult protective services and law enforcement. But I don't want to ruin his life, I said, tears pricking my eyes. He's still my son. You are trying to stop him from ruining yours, she said gently. There is a difference. Sometimes the only thing that teaches someone like your son is consequences. After the call, I sat in the dark closet for a long time, the phone warm against my cheek. I felt grief, yes, the kind you feel at a funeral. I also felt something else. Not hope, that felt too bright, but maybe sturdiness. Like I'd been a doormat and suddenly remembered I had a wooden floor underneath. I cried, but not like the weeping, confused patient Mark described to the staff. I cried quietly, tears slipping down the collar of my shirt, my hands clenched into fists around Miss Patel's business card. Someone believed me. Someone was willing to fight for me. That was enough to make my heart feel a little less small. We agreed that I would say nothing to my family yet. In the background, she would prepare the documents, coordinate with the bank, and set things in motion. When I came out of the closet, I caught my reflection in the guest room mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. My face was paler, my hair needed a proper wash. There were new worry lines around my mouth. But my eyes looked clearer than they had in weeks. They think I'm slipping, I told that woman softly. I'm slipping right out of their trap. I folded Miss Patel's number and tucked it into my bra, close to my skin, where no one would think to look. Then I opened my notebook and started a new list on a fresh page. On one side, I wrote,
what they took. On the other, what I'm taking back. If they wanted a signature so badly, I decided, I would give them one they'd never forget. From that day forward, every polite conversation, every "how are you feeling?" and "do you need anything?" from Mark and Jenna became a small move on a much larger board they didn't know we were playing. Miss Patel worked fast. She filed paperwork to revoke the existing power of attorney. She drew up a new one naming Beth as my backup decision maker, at least for finances. She contacted Mr. Collins, the bank manager, and requested an internal review of the home equity loan and the transfers. She said they were taking this seriously. No institution wants to be caught facilitating exploitation of an elder. They may not admit fault, but they will investigate quickly. Meanwhile, I received confirmation from Beth, her voice crackling with long-distance static and emotion. "Mom, the retirement account transfer went through. The statement came here. It's all in your name still. I can mail you copies or scan them to your lawyer. Keep them somewhere safe. And please don't say anything to Mark yet." "Are you kidding?" she burst out. "After what he's done." "I know. Believe me, I know. But if we push too soon, he'll scramble. He'll hide things. I need him to stay confident a little longer." There was a pause. I could picture her on the other end, hair in a messy bun like Lily's, a child on her hip, anger in her eyes. "I hate that you're going through this alone," she said finally. "I'm not alone," I replied. "Not anymore. I have you. I have a lawyer. I even have a nurse whose note I will keep in my Bible until the day I die." Miss Patel suggested a meeting. She said we'd invite them here under the guise of finalizing nursing home admission and sale proceeds. People like your son show their true colors when they think they're about to get exactly what they want. "But I'm not going to give them that," I said. "No," she agreed. "You're going to invite them to sign something else entirely." We set the date for the following week. Between then and now, life at Mark's house continued, but the ground under it shifted. One night, I was in my room talking to Miss Patel on speaker, my phone face down on the bed. I'd learned that sometimes the sound carried less that way. We were going over the list of suspicious transfers when the door opened a crack. I hit the mute button so fast my thumb stung. "Oh, Elaine, just wanted to bring you leftovers. You need to keep your strength up for the move." I pasted on a smile. "Thank you, dear. I was just talking to a church friend about the prayer list. You know how Doris can go on and on." "Of course," she said, but her eyes lingered on my phone for a second too long. "Well, don't tire yourself out." The moment she left, my heart pounded against my ribs. That had been close. Too close. Another day, Lily came in after school and froze when she saw my notebook open on the nightstand. "Did you leave this out?" she hissed.
I shook my head. I had it under the pillow. She flipped through the first pages. Blood pressure readings, a grocery list, a sketch of a quilt pattern. She exhaled in relief. "Dad came in to check on you earlier," she said. "I saw him pick it up. He laughed and said, 'Grandma and her list.' He didn't read long." I felt a flicker of pride that my years in the library had taught me how to hide important things in plain sight. Meanwhile, the emotional strain tugged at my heart like an old injury. I had a late-night call with Beth that nearly broke me. "I knew something was off," she sobbed. "When he told me not to worry about your finances, that he had it under control. He pressured me to stay out of it, said I didn't understand investments. And I believed him. I left you there, Mom." "You didn't leave me," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "He pushed you out. There's a difference. And you're here now. That's what matters." We shared memories of Tom, how he always said, "We don't steal from family, not even time." how he'd refused to borrow from his own mother's nest egg, even when money was tight. I should have read everything, I whispered. I should have asked more questions. I should have... No, Mom, no, she cut in sharply. You should have been able to trust your son. That's all. You're not the one who broke anything. Her fierce loyalty warmed something in my chest that had been cold for months. Between calls, I prepared myself the way I used to prepare my students for a big test. Small steps, repeated out loud. I practiced sentences in my head while I walked slowly down the hallway, holding on to the banister. I may be older, but I am not incompetent. I did not consent to those transfers. You do not get to sell my home while I'm in a hospital bed. I even wrote them down on an index card and slipped it into my purse. Miss Patel set the stage meticulously. She arranged for a letter from the bank's fraud department to be ready, summarizing their preliminary findings. She requested copies of every suspicious document: the deed, the loan, the transfer authorizations, the power of attorney. She also quietly informed the hospital's social worker, who in turn filed a preliminary report with Adult Protective Services. Just in case, she told me. It adds weight when they know other agencies are watching. The night before the meeting, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, my sensible shoes lined up neatly on the floor, and my navy dress hanging on the closet door. Guilt gnawed at me when I thought of Lily. What will happen to her if her parents get into trouble? I asked Miss Patel earlier. She's a minor. The goal is not to destroy her life, she said. The goal is to protect you and, frankly, her future inheritance, too. Remember, enabling is not love, Mrs. Turner. Lily answered that question herself when she came in with a cup of tea she'd made wrong on purpose so she could stay a little longer. Grandma, she curled her legs under her on the chair. I know things are going to change after whatever you planning. I blinked. What makes you think I'm planning something? She rolled her eyes, a hint of teenage attitude peeking out. Please, you're quieter than usual, and when you're quiet, you're dangerous. Mom says that all the time. I couldn't help it. I laughed. She reached over and squeezed my hand. She said, "What they're doing is wrong," and her voice was firm in a way I'd never heard. I'd rather be poor and proud than rich because we stole from you. That sentence went into my notebook too, under reasons to keep going. The next morning, I dressed like I was going to church and court at the same time. I put on my simple navy dress, the one I'd worn to Tom's funeral. I slid my feet into my comfortable black shoes. I clasped the small silver cross around my neck that my mother had given me. As Jenna fussed with my scarf at the door, tightening it around my neck like a gentle noose, I met her eyes in the mirror. It'll be good to have everything clear and in writing, I said calmly. She smiled, satisfied. Exactly, she agreed. They had no idea how right I was. We pulled into the parking lot of Miss Patel's office mid-morning. The building was one of those new professional complexes, brick and glass, neat little bushes lining the walkway. The air smelt faintly of mulch and coffee from the cafe across the street. Inside, the waiting room was quiet, with soft chairs and a bowl of wrapped candies on the table. I could hear the faint hiss of the copier behind the front desk. "Mom, we're a little early," Mark said, checking his watch. "Good. Less time for you to get tired." I sank into the chair, hands folded around my purse, and watched him pace. Jenna sat stiffly, her mouth pinched, scrolling on her phone. When Miss Patel came out to greet us, she wore a simple navy suit, her dark hair pulled back, her expression composed. "Mrs. Turner," she said, extending her hand to me first.
It's good to see you in person. And you must be Mark and Jenna. Thank you for coming.
Her eyes were warm when they landed on me, cool and assessing when they moved to them. We followed her into a conference room with a long table, big windows overlooking the parking lot, and the coffee pot on a sideboard. A neat stack of folders sat waiting. I could hear my own breath, the faint ticking of a wall clock, the rustle of paper as she took her seat. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I know this is a stressful time. The stated purpose of this meeting is to discuss Mrs. Turner's future care and the financial arrangements that would need to be in place for a potential move to a long-term care facility." "Exactly," Mark said, leaning forward. "I'm glad we can finally get everything signed and squared away." "Yes," she said politely. "Before we proceed, however, there are some things that must be clarified regarding Mrs. Turner's current financial situation and the authority under which recent decisions have been made." She opened the top folder and pulled out a document, sliding it to the center of the table. "This," she said, "is the durable power of attorney you have been using, Mr. Turner." He glanced at it and nodded. "Right. We did that years ago. As of last week," she continued, her voice smooth, "this document has been revoked. Here is the signed revocation, executed by Mrs. Turner and notarized, as well as a letter from her physician affirming her mental competence to make that decision." She placed 2 more pages on the table. The room seemed to tilt for a second as I watched Mark's face. His confident expression faltered. You can't do that," he stammered. "Mom, you don't understand what you're—" "She absolutely can," Ms. Patel interrupted calmly. "As her attorney, in fact, you serve at her pleasure, not the other way around. She has the right to withdraw that authority at any time as long as she is competent. Her doctor confirms that she is." Jenna shifted in her seat. "This is very confusing," she said sharply. "We're just trying to do what's best for her. She's been very ill." "We'll get to that," Ms. Patel said. "For now, you need to understand that as of this moment, you have no legal authority to act on Mrs. Turner's behalf. Not with the banks, not with the hospital, and certainly not with the sale of her home." She opened another folder and pulled out a thick bundle of papers clipped together. "These are records from Riverband Bank and Prime Home Equity Services. They include the home equity line of credit taken out on Mrs. Turner's property 6 months ago." My stomach clenched as she laid it flat and turned it so we could all see. My signature stared up at me again, scribbled at the bottom. Above it in bold letters, "Home Equity Line of Credit Agreement." "The date of this document," she continued, tapping it with her pen, "matches the date Mrs. Turner recalls signing insurance forms at her kitchen table. She reports that she was not informed that she was putting her paid-off home up as collateral." "It was for her own care," Mark snapped, color rising in his face. "We needed liquidity." "Perhaps, but informed consent still matters. The bank has initiated an internal fraud and compliance review due to concerns about how this was presented. They are particularly interested in your role, Mr. Turner, given your position as a financial professional and holder of her power of attorney at the time." The word fraud hung in the air like a bad smell. Jenna's hand flew to her mouth. "We would never," she began. "There is more," Ms. Patel said, sliding yet another paper forward. "These are transaction summaries from Mrs. Turner's primary savings account over the past year." She read the figures aloud, each one like a small hammer blow. $3,000 labeled Care Agreement Online Transfer to an account in your name, Mr. Turner. Then $5,000, then $2,000, repeated monthly. In addition, multiple ATM withdrawals Mrs. Turner states she did not make. He opened his mouth, closed it again. "She has no written care agreement with you, no invoices, no receipts for hired caregivers.
The only documented care she has received during this time are the hospital services. She let the silence stretch, then dropped the word slowly, like a stone into water. We call this misappropriation of funds. My hands were cold, but my spine was straight. At first, I stayed quiet, letting their voices rise. It was oddly satisfying watching the patter they relied on for months crumble under someone else's questions. We were always going to pay it back, Mark burst out. This was temporary. I've been under incredible pressure. My job, the market. You moved your mother's money into your own account, repeatedly, without her clear knowledge or consent. That is not how temporary loans from a vulnerable client work, especially when that client is your mother. Jenna's voice turned shrill. You're making it sound so ugly, she cried. We've been breaking our back taking care of her. She forgets things, she falls. Mark has been doing all the work. Surely that's worth something. It may well be, Miss Patel said evenly, but compensation for caregiving is set out in written agreements, not quietly siphoned off accounts while planning to move the caregiver into a facility she does not want. She finally turned to me. Her expression softened. Mrs. Turner, would you like to say anything? I had rehearsed this moment in my head, in the quiet of my borrowed room, in the whispers between me and my pillow. Now that it was here, the words came easier than I expected. Yes, I said. My voice was clear. It did not tremble.
I woke up in a hospital bed, I said slowly, with a needle in my arm and strangers talking about where I would live as if I were an abandoned dog at the shelter. My own son told them I had a history of confusion. He said he controlled my finances. He said he was putting me in a home. I looked at Mark. His jaw was clenched, eyes bright with anger and something like fear. I trusted you, I said. I trusted you so much, I stopped reading the fine print. I let "do you trust me" take the place of grown-up questions I should have asked. That's on me. But what you did with that trust, that is on you. He started to speak. I held up a hand. I'm not done. The room went very still. You cut your sister out of every decision, I went on. You listed yourself as my only emergency contact, my only advocate. You took my house, my savings, and my choices, and treated them like entries in one of your spreadsheets. You stood at the foot of my bed and talked about where to store me while you cashed out my life. A small shocked sound came from Jenna. Lily, sitting quietly in the corner, with her hands folded in her lap, stared at the table. I am not a line item in your budget, Mark. I am your mother. I wiped her nose and stayed up all night when you had croup. I worked double shifts so you could go on that school trip you begged for. I went without new shoes so you could have nice ones. I did all that, not so you could one day decide I was too expensive to keep. My chest hurt, but it was a good ache, a cleansing one. Ms. Patel cleared her throat gently. As you can see here, she said, the emotional damage here is significant. The legal damage may be as well. If you do not agree to make this right, we will pursue every available remedy. Remedy? Jenna echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, that includes, but is not limited to, assisting Mrs. Turner in filing criminal charges for financial abuse and fraud, pressing the bank to complete their investigation, and cooperating with Adult Protective Services, and if necessary, your professional licensing board, Mr. Turner. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't, he said hoarsely, looking at me. Mom, you wouldn't do that to me. I felt my heart twist. For a second, I saw him at 8 years old, standing in the kitchen with scraped knees, clutching his broken toy truck,
eyes full of tears. "Fix it, Mommy," he'd said. I took a breath. "I am giving you a chance to fix it. Now, before someone else decides what happens to you." Miss Patel slid one final document across the table. It was shorter than the others, but somehow heavier. "This is an agreement," she explained, "that you will cooperate fully with the bank's efforts to unwind the fraudulent loan on your mother's house, that you will return as much of the transferred funds as possible, and that you will relinquish any and all claims to decision-making over her finances or living situation. You will also consent to a protective order around her accounts. In exchange, Mrs. Turner agrees, for now, not to pursue criminal charges. That could change if you failed to comply." Jenna reached for Mark's arm. "You can't sign that," she hissed. "Do you know what that means for your job? For us?" Lily's voice cut through the tension, small but strong. "Dad, I showed Grandma those statements. She didn't know. She thought she still had her money. You told me we were just moving things around for her care." He stared at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. "You... what?" he whispered. "She has a right to know," Lily said, her chin trembling. "She always told me secrets rot in the dark." Those were my words, coming back to him out of his own child's mouth. I almost smiled, despite everything. Miss Patel looked at him. "You are welcome to refuse," she said calmly. "I will simply note that refusal in our report and proceed accordingly. But if you mean what you say about this being temporary, about stress, about never intending harm, this is your opportunity to show it." His hand shook as he picked up the pen. I watched him sign his name, not as the confident son swooping in to save the day, but as a man who had finally hit a consequence he couldn't negotiate his way out of. When it was my turn, I signed too, not handing away power, but taking it back. As we left the office, Ms. Patel put a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You did well," she murmured. "I feel sick," I admitted. "That's normal. Justice is rarely painless, but it is necessary." I walked out of that building slowly, leaning on my cane. The autumn air felt crisp on my face. The sky looked taller somehow. For the first time in a long time, I felt taller too. The weeks that followed were not a neat montage. Life rarely is. The sale of my house was canceled after the bank completed their review. They found irregularities in how the loan had been initiated and how the documents were presented. "We won't publicly admit fault," Mr. Collins said stiffly in one call, "but we will be unwinding the loan out of an abundance of caution."
Lawyers speak a special dialect of English. That was his way of saying, "We're quietly fixing this before someone sues us." A portion of the transferred funds came back as part of the settlement Ms. Patel negotiated. Not all of it. Some was gone, swallowed by vacations and kitchen renovations and God knows what. But enough came back to stabilize me. Mark's employer was notified. The firm put him on leave, pending the outcome of ongoing investigations. There were whispers about his license, his ethics. In his world, reputation is currency. Overnight, his balance dropped. Jenna's world shrank too. The bigger house she'd been eyeing slipped out of reach. The Instagram posts about their blessed life slowed to a trickle. Her friends, the kind who love wine nights and gossip more than loyalty, stepped back. "People are talking," Lily told me once, sitting at the foot of my freshly made bed, "about how Dad almost stole your house, about how you got a lawyer. Some of Mom's friends don't want to hang out anymore. She's furious." "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle," I said, smoothing the quilt over her knee. "I'd rather be in the middle of the truth than on the edge of a lie," she said, surprising me again. Adult Protective Services sent a woman named Carla to interview me at my kitchen table. Not Mark's, mine. By then, I was back home. The for sale sign was gone. The grass had grown a little wild, but the house was still mine. The first thing I did when I moved back in was rearrange my kitchen cabinets the way I liked them. Carla asked questions in a gentle voice, recording our conversation with a little device on the table. "Do you feel safe now, Mrs. Turner?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I have an attorney. I have my accounts under my control, and I have a new lock on the door." "Do you wish to pursue criminal charges?" she asked. I hesitated. The words tasted bitter and heavy. "For now," I said slowly, "no. I want there to be a record. I want someone out there to know what happened in case he ever tries this with someone else, or with me again. But I am not ready to see my son in handcuffs. Not yet." She nodded. "That's your choice. We're here to support whatever level of action you want to take." Beth flew in for a week and became my project manager. She helped me set up automatic payments I controlled, not Mark. She sat with me at the bank while we opened new accounts and closed old ones. We sat with Miss Patel and updated my will, making sure every clause reflected my wishes, not anyone else's. We're putting in a clause that anyone who contests this will is automatically disinherited. It tends to discourage creative interpretations. "Good," I said. "I'm tired of being someone else's project." We arranged for a part-time caregiver, a sweet woman named Marcia, to come by 3 afternoons a week. She helped with laundry, groceries, and those chores my knee resented. I paid her myself, with money that had my name on it. Holidays changed. The first Thanksgiving after everything, the table was smaller. It was just me, Beth, her kids, and Lily, who came for dessert and stayed long enough to help with the dishes. Mark and Jenna had their own gathering elsewhere. There were no group photos that year, no forced smiles around a turkey. I mourned the family I thought I had. I grieved for the boy who used to fall asleep on my chest. I tried to make peace with the man he'd become. But each month, when I sat at the same kitchen table where I'd once signed away my power and now wrote checks on my own terms, I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. I had not fixed everything, but I had stopped the bleeding. These days, my mornings look a lot like they used to, with a few new additions. The kettle still whistles on the stove, the same blue one Tom brought me. The early light still slants through the window over the sink, catching dust motes in the air like tiny planets. My cupboard's back the way I like them, cups above the kettle, plates within easy reach, spices in the order that makes sense to me, not to anyone else. I sit at the table with my notebook and my laptop open. The notebook holds my grocery list, recipes I want to try, birthdays I don't want to forget, and yes, a few reminders about passwords and account alerts. On the laptop screen, my bank account shows its modest but steady balance. Every major movement comes with an email alert now, one that dings on my phone, and sometimes on Lily's. Marcia arrives around midday, humming as she lets herself in. "Morning, Miss Elaine," she calls. "How's my favorite client?" "I'm your only client," I tease. "Still counts," she grins. She works for me, not for my son. That distinction matters more than I can say. Once a month, I go down to the library and sit in a circle of other grade heads in the community room. We sip bad coffee and talk about wills, phone scams, helpful relatives, and all the things nobody warns you about when you're busy raising those very relatives. Sometimes I share my story. Not all the details, just enough to let another woman see herself in my mistakes and maybe in my courage too. I thought I was being a good mother by trusting him. Turns out, being a good mother sometimes means saying no, even when it hurts. I don't pretend everything is healed.
There are nights when I lie in bed and replay that meeting in Miss Patel's office, hearing Mark's voice crack,
seeing Jenna's horror when she realized their friends might know. Guilt and anger still wrestle in my chest. I pray for him, not the way I used to, asking God to bless his career and his plans. Now I pray that he learns the difference between providing for his family and plundering the one that raised him. I pray that he teaches his children better. But I also keep my locks changed. I keep my legal documents updated. Love is not the same thing as access. Lily comes by after school when she can. She bursts through the front door like a gust of teenage energy, dropping her backpack on the floor. "Grandma, do you have snacks?" she calls back, heading straight for the pantry. "Since when do I not have snacks?" I call back. We sit at the table with cookies and milk, her textbook spread out, my laptop open. "Teach me again how to set up that alert thing," she asks, nodding toward the screen, "for my little savings account." We leaned in, shoulder to shoulder, as I show her how to make the bank text her every time more than $20 leaves her account. "You don't have to be rich to pay attention," I tell her. "The habit matters more than the size of the numbers." She nods. "I like knowing," she says. "I don't ever want to be surprised like you were." "Me neither," I said softly. Sometimes, when she thinks I'm not looking, I catch her watching me with a mix of admiration and questions. "Do you miss him?" she asked once, out of nowhere. I knew who she meant. "Yes," I said honestly. "I miss the boy he was. I even miss the man I thought he was. I don't miss what he did." She chewed that over like a tough piece of meat. She said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I'm sorry too. But you know what? Sorry doesn't fix bank accounts, or houses, or trust. Only actions do that." In the evenings, when the house is quiet and the dishes are done, I sometimes sit on the couch with a blanket over my knees and talk out loud to the women I imagine on the other end of the story. Maybe someone like you, listening while folding laundry or stirring a pot of soup. I tell you this because I wish someone had told me. Growing older does not mean you hand your life over like a coat at a check room. You do not owe your children your silence in exchange for their help. Being nice should never mean being blind. You are allowed to ask questions about money. You are allowed to read everything before you sign. You are allowed to say, "I need to think about this," even if your child rolls their eyes. You are allowed to get a second opinion from a doctor, from a lawyer, from that little voice in your own chest that says, "Something isn't right." Because here is what I learned, the hard and expensive way. If you let someone treat your trust like loose change, don't be surprised when they try to spend your whole life. So count every coin, including your own worth.